on deck, we have some killer tips and strategy from D&D super fans, Joe Manganiello and Kyle Newman. Kyle and Joe, let's hear from you.
We
Hello.
prefer employees. We prefer employees, D&D employees, right? Kyle, author of Art and Arcana, the complete history of Dungeons and Dragons, and the upcoming Heroes Feast, which is the updated D&D cookbook for the next generation. Kyle, thanks for being here, buddy.
It is a pleasure being here with you. Joe is a consummate professional and a master dungeon master. And every time I have the pleasure of chatting with Joe, hanging with Joe, playing with Joe, my imagination is always sparked and I always learn something new. So it's great to sit down with you today, Joe. I mean, you got this incredible history as an actor and a performer, but you're also a immaculate storyteller, and that comes to surface in dungeon mastering. And dungeon mastering, I think, is an overlooked art form. It exists in the moment somewhere between classic oral tradition and modern improvisational storytelling. And for many, it's the thing you do in your home or in your living room. For some, it's something you do on a grand stage with millions of people watching. And all that requires different sets of skills and talents. And you can actually do both. And you've played on the highest level and you've dungeon mastered at the highest level. But I don't think this craft, it's a dynamic craft that hasn't kind of received its due in the spotlight, despite the magnitude of attention currently on the game in Dungeons & Dragons. So let's talk about it. I mean, while the game's changed cosmetically and mechanically, the art of dungeon mastering really hasn't changed a lot in 50 years because it's really like you're the director, you're the storyteller, and you're reading a room, you're intuiting what your players want, and you're letting the story unfurl. How do you go about that challenge organically? Especially when we play in a game, Joe's Death Saves game, there's upwards of 11 or 12 players sometimes. So you have to manage a large room of people. How do you go about something like that when you have this large room of personalities?
Well, first of all, thanks for all that nice stuff that you just said. Yeah, I have a history with the game. And although the game has changed cosmetically over the years, dungeon mastering is like riding a bike. And I always say to people, if you want friends, learn how to dungeon master. If you learn how to dungeon master, there's always going to be kids showing up on your porch that want to play with you. So I would say that first and foremost, and that certainly was me. Growing up, I ran games all summer long, and I was an athlete. So in the morning, I would go off and run basketball clinics for younger kids. I'd play in a summer league game. I'd go lift with the wrestlers. I'd run home. And when I got home, there'd be a bunch of kids on the porch with their trapper keepers and pencils ready to go and dice. And I would unlock the door. They'd go in, set up while I took a shower. I'd come down and I'd run games until nighttime. And, those were also those are smaller groups. An ideal, all the D&D books are balanced for 4 players. Like you said, I run games for 11 or 12 with you guys, which is like 2 or 3 groups put together. And you have to set the tone as the dungeon master, I think. We have a lot of fun and we laugh hysterically, but everybody takes it seriously. Everybody's like really hardcore and does their work when they're away during the week. They're always looking at their spells and action economy, and if I throw this, then I'll throw that, and strategizing and calling each other. And I know there's a text thread with all the spellcasters on it, and then there's another text thread with the tanks and the fighters and the barbarians on it, and they all talk strategy and how we're gonna better play with each other as a team. And you want to set the tone for that. And along those lines, when you talk about that, you're talking about like emotional intelligence, basically. And there is a bit of that because, I'm a notorious prepper and a planner and a writer. Like you said, it is like being the showrunner of your own series, except it's going to be the decisions and plot lines and plot arcs are going to be decided by live, by improv, and then by dice rolls. So you've got to be permeable enough that you can go in different directions, so that in the moment you're laying this railroad track down that the train is going to move on. And along those lines as well, and we could talk about this a little bit later, but you know that you know understanding how much laughter and fun there is with how much suspense or how
Yeah.
much gameplay. And when you have a big group of 11 or 12, you got to move the combat. So everybody's going to come to the table knowing what they're doing and ready to go. You can spend the time between your turn, between turns, pop the book. So I like players, and the players that are in our game that have settled into our game that I will DM for on a regular basis are people that, the players will bring something to the table too. And I think as a DM, it's understanding what all those, what do your players want individually, everybody understanding how to feed those people and give those people what they want, so that, because everybody's experience is going to be different. So it's about everybody coming away from the table happy, even though everybody wants different things.
And that's something you do really well. Obviously, we have a very diverse group of people. Everyone comes to the table with something they want to get out of Dungeons and Dragons. Maybe at first they want that nostalgic experience of your childhood, but then you get hooked into your character, and there's things you want to see in your character's growth. And you do a really fine job of balancing the growth and interspersing character moments along with maintaining the drive and the epic scope. And there's Bubbles. Bubbles is the secret 13th member.
It's our mascot, yeah.
I think that's one of the challenges of Dungeons and Dragons, because it's not just a dungeon crawl. There is a story unfurling, and in something like our Death Saves game that's been going for 2 years or more, and the group has changed dynamics very organically, and we've added players, and I think it's the role play is still present even in a really large game. And do you have any ideas or tips about how you stimulate the role play and let people? I think, real quick, sometimes I hear people say, "I don't know if I can play Dungeons and Dragons. I don't do improv comedy." And I said, it's not improv comedy; it's improvisation. I think that gets misconstrued. You don't have to be a comedian. You don't have to worry about your performance, your timing. It's the improv, the decisions, the split-second choices you're going to make, or how you're going to interpret a roll of the dice, the chance, and how you do that. You don't have to be inherently funny. It's just what choices you make, and that's the improvisation we're talking about. So how do you encourage role play at a table?
What I'll say about that is, I'll say that one of the secrets or keys to dungeon mastering is everything is inspiration. So like anything you get inspiration for winds up in the game. I have a little dog named Bubbles. So, I remember in one adventure I was playing in as a player, I was like in the Arctic, and there was like a colony of Arctic mice, like voles. And I wound up like luring one in with like my character. I pulled some crackers out of my rations and like lured it in, and then wound up with this little pet vole that kind of was like Bubbles. You know what I'm saying? Like anything that's going on in your life, you bring it, bring it to the table and have fun. And I'll say that, yes, I'm a performer by trade, but like usually when I play D&D, I don't want to act. I don't really want to perform because I do that at work. So anyone who's afraid that like I need to do a bad British accent in order to play Dungeons and Dragons just isn't right. You don't have to do any of that at all. In fact, most of the times when I play, I don't want to do any of that because this is like fun for me. I'm on vacation from
Sometimes
work.
you do.
But when I'm
Sometimes, Joe,
sometimes you do too, which is the
we've got
greatest.
some colorful characters. We're in this dark and serious game. It's very epic. And there is a friend of the group named Christopher Squawkin who flies in sometimes. And Joe's had some, what was the character who sounds suspiciously like Mark Wahlberg?
Well, so I'll say this: when I'm playing as a player, I don't like acting or doing the voices. When I'm dungeon mastering, yes, I do all the voices. I mean,
Yeah.
that's, you bring whatever it is to the table that you do well. For Tracy Hickman, who wrote the Dragonlance novels and Ravenloft, which is widely agreed to be the greatest of all Dungeons and Dragons modules. We can fight about it in the chat, but that a lot of people agree that Ravenloft is the greatest.
Yeah.
And Tracy's not an actor, but Tracy's a writer. So when Tracy dungeon masters, and I've actually played Ravenloft with Tracy, the descriptions of the food on the table and the descriptions of the organ music and the wood of the drawbridge, and like, it's just, you feel like you're inside of one of his novels, but that's his talent. So if you're funny, bring the funny. If you do funny voices, bring the voices. A lot of my voices, like you said, you guys meet a seagull, and of course we have a druid in the group. So every adventure he wants to talk to some different animal, so that I'll do all the voices, whether it's a horse. Oh yes, well, the horse starts talking to you. They went that way, or is there a
The ram.
squirrel in a tree? Yes, there's a squirrel in the tree. And oh my God, oh wow, hi. And all of a sudden it's the South Park, killer Christmas animals. And then of course the seagull is, is nonplussed about everything you guys are doing. He's not very impressed. In fact, he's amazed whenever you wind up not dying. And that's Christopher Squawkin, the seagull. So yeah, I always try to bring, add some fun. But then there's, for example, like Vince's character, he went to go see his father. His father was sick. So he went to go see his father, and I wrote this huge speech. I did a lot of prep work. I wrote all this speech and talking points for his father on his deathbed. And once we started working through that speech, I had these points down. It was just Vince and I improvising over the top of the table about his dad, which was like a really serious and like touching moment. Or when characters die, you talk about how to incorporate story and background and development and character arc. We had our cleric died, the death cleric died, and so I wrote a ton of big, speeches and talking points for his god. So he appeared on this alternate plane where he met the god, and the god was speaking to him as all these ravens were flying around and forming a body to talk to, and then scattering and coming back together. And I just sat quietly and saw I just saw that in my mind, and then started writing what this god that was going to have to give him up if he was resurrected by another god's patrons. And so it was this talk basically about a father giving up his son, and it got serious, but it was, there are moments of fun, and then there's moments of seriousness. And I just, I urge all, dungeon masters, just go with your gut. Like, what do you see in your brain? Just get that out on the table. You're going to be playing for years. So whatever snaps into your brain, like, write it down and go with it.
Yeah, there are no rules for it. There's no right or wrong, and you go with your instincts. And like you were saying, you lean into your skills, your talents. And if you're a writer, you do that. And one thing I find that helps pace a game is you just read it and you think of it like a film, cinematically. And moment like you were describing between Jericho, the Death Cleric, and his god, we sat back as the players, the other players, and just watched this moment happened like it was a scene in a movie, and we were then watching it. We weren't present in a sense, and we watched it unfurl before us, and then we jump back into the action. So then suddenly there's a pace change, and all games can't be nonstop action, and it just can't be all drama either, because like you're saying, it has levity and it has weight, and you have to ride those moments, and you have to give them just enough of it. Another thing you do is you really balance episodic storytelling well. Like, it always feels like we're ending, like it's the end of a TV show, and you just want to either let it stream into the next one or wait till the next week. And it feels like it ends at this great cliffhanger. And I think that's a skill too, is how you balance, look at the material in front of you and say, well, this is the macro story, and they're going to probably get this far, and then finding a way to wrap it up each week. And we play longer sessions. These aren't like 3-4 hour sessions. We're normally playing 6, 7, 8 hours. And there's a lot of material. So how do you find those breaking points to make it feel episodic, so it does feel like an ongoing series?
Well, I'll say this. I'll say this as a dungeon master, this is what you're after. You are after a moment with your players where they go, oh, like that's what you want. Whether it's, the boss shows up, the monster shows up, the miniature, the scary miniature comes down on the table, or like you're saying at the end of an episode, that they're gonna go, oh no, oh we have to wait, so developing that instinct of like what's going to drive your players crazy, like even in game, like when you guys go to like some town council meeting in Waterdeep, I know exactly what's going to make Tom really mad. So I'll
So
make
who are we
sure that
talking
some
about here?
character.
We're talking about, do you want to go through some of the people in the group? I think it might be helpful to get a sense of the varied personalities that are on display here. When you say Tom, you're talking about Tom Morello from Rage Against the Machine. And when you're talking about Vince, you're talking about the Vince Vaughn. And so there's people with these insane vocational backgrounds that come to the table just like teenagers to play this game on a weekly basis, which you want to talk about the makeup of the group, who's in the group?
Well, sure. Yeah. And then we can like double back to kind of
Yeah.
like chapters and how like chapters in an adventure, work out. But yeah, so, the core group was, my brother has the typical younger brother D&D story. He was my kid brother and he, 4.5 years younger, but I let him play with me and the older kids at at tabletop gaming when he was a kid. So he just grew up with it. So he's in the group. Kyle, you're in the group, but originally you made a half-orc barbarian and so did Taryn Killam. And the two of you never showed up in the same adventure together. It was like, and Taryn had a half-orc barbarian and you did, and you never, it was like, it wasn't planned. It just was like the days Taryn couldn't show up, you were there. The days you couldn't show up, Taryn was there. So we always had one half-orc barbarian, but it was never two at the same time. So anyway, but it was, originally it was you, my brother, John Castle, who's a great screenwriter who was in the Carnegie Mellon graduate program when I was undergrad acting there. So we've been friends forever. And it was Ryan Vernier, who works at Riot Games, works on League of Legends and others, big story creator, designer, brilliant, amazing dungeon master also. And Ron Matthews, who was my trainer through all the True Blood and Magic Mike movies, and he's also was crowned the world's fittest man at age 46 in the CrossFit Games. He won the CrossFit Masters Champion, so he's jacked. And I like to tell people my D&D group will kick your D&D group's ass. I like to say, sorry, I don't know if I can say it on this, but there it is. I did it. But we have a really big kind of stereotype breaking group because who comes into the group after that but Big Show from WWE Wrestling, the champion. We have George Finn, who is a friend of ours, an actor in LA, and he's a great a friend and an amazing player from your guys' group. Kyle is in another group, another D&D group called the Lads, the LA D&D Society. There's little factions that have popped up in LA for D&D. Past that, then you get Tom Morello, rock god, guitar god, and he brought his friends from Chicago, Vince Vaughn, and then his friend from his kids' carpool lane, who is Dan Weiss, DB Weiss, who created Game of Thrones, along with his partner Dave Benioff, who will moonlight in the game from time to time. And I'm trying to think, am I missing anybody or did I get everybody? I think I got them all. I'm looking at the character art. I think I got everybody, right? Is that everybody?
That's the spectrum. And that's what so everyone comes into this and you're not only weaving personal stories, but you're trying to make it so these things, these epic 11-round turns in combat end with these episodic cliffhanger moments or dramatic pauses. And it's definitely not an easy thing to craft into a 7 or 8 hour session. to pick those moments and choose them?
Well, I think for me, it's all about the prep work and it's all about the sandbox. So, you know, I try to create as much of a sandbox as I can because ultimately, as a dungeon master, you can plan and you can say, oh, my characters are going to go this way, my characters are going to go that way. But then inevitably, something insane happens, whether by dice rolling or something some player does.
Yeah.
And you need to be ready for that. And you need to be ready to, pull things out of the hat. And so, what I find for me that's best is understanding the chapter or the world that your players are going to be inhabiting at a certain place at a certain time. So, I kind of have like, if you think about a TV show, TV arcs are usually 6 episodes, in the long form format of 22 episode seasons. If you say like, you would have like a 4 to 6 episode arc where something gets handled. There's like a mini arc within the greater arc. So the greater arc is Tiamat is going to come back and destroy the realms. Within that, you have these chapters and these mini stories and these mini arcs. And so with those mini arcs, a lot of times I'll spend a lot of time building out that arc that might last us a month or a month and a half as you guys
Yeah.
work through. You guys are up in the spine of the world and you are looking for the iceberg in which the white dragon lives. And that's probably going to take a few sessions. So I'll build that all out so that no matter what way you guys go, if someone, murders the chief of the tribe and the warlock pulls his specter out and starts flying the specter out, there's really nothing in any D&D book that's going to prepare you for that happening. But you need to be prepared as to how the rest of the tribe that inhabits this iceberg is going to deal with the fact that that just happened. There's going to be fear, there's going to be revolt, and now all of a sudden you're going to be off on this other tangent. And just being ready for that, because some of the greatest moments in D&D are the ones you never expect. Those are the ones you remember.
And sometimes the only way you can prepare is just by understanding your players and knowing that these are some of the choices they make or what the choices they may intend on making, and how you can challenge them or how you can subvert them and see if there's growth happening or if they're going to lean into it. Now, you were talking about the White Dragon battle. One battle we recently had was this Battle of Waterdeep, and that lasted weeks. And we've been playing digitally. We've been playing virtually as a group because of COVID. But prior to that, you were very, we did a lot of miniatures. You have an extensive miniature collection, beautifully painted, just spanning the history of miniatures. Use a lot of terrain on the table. Do you have thoughts about analog versus digital, considering what's going on in the world, and also just tactical versus theater of the mind?
Yeah, I love building. I love building with my Dwarven Forge and my miniatures. It's fun. I just throw on some music. I go down in the basement and I just put together some build. So I enjoy all of that, and I think there's such a wow factor in that because as kids, we had graph paper and lead pencils and erasers, and that was your map. And now the fact that you could actually play on like in the real terrain or in the real dungeon or build outdoor terrain, it's just, to me, that's mind blowing. And so as an adult, oh my gosh, when I got back into D&D after not having played for years, it was like, I can't believe all this stuff exists. So it became really fun for me. Like I was in, I went to the Luca Festival to represent Dungeons and Dragons last year, and I was like scouring all the best hobby stores in Florence, Italy, and just buying. I bought so many miniatures, and I brought them home, and just amazing things I had never seen that they had painted over there. So I like traveling the world and finding all these things and bringing them home because, like I said, as soon as I put them down on the table, the group is going to go, "Oh man!" And then the cameras are going to come out and the pictures, and everybody gets excited to go into this battle. With COVID, the show must go on. So roll 20,
Mhm.
I go into roll 20 and I either, download the D&D modules to get their maps out of it, or I go in and I make my own and I search around to see what all the, proprietary little, map makers have. And like with that Battle of Waterdeep, I had wanted to build that out of Dwarven Forge. I wanted to build a giant city and have this giant dragon battle in a city. But then COVID hit and it was like, oh no, what am I going to do? So I built a map of Waterdeep from scratch, pulling pieces out of Roll 20. And I wanted the buildings burning. So I had to like cut the flames out and put the flames on the buildings. And then, I had to go and, I have custom monsters. So I had to like go find the pictures and then upload the custom monster pictures and Draconians. So I was downloading all the Dragonlance art with the Draconians and the mammoth walkers and, all that kind of stuff. So it's just a matter of acclimating to the tools at hand. So whether it's building with Dwarven Forge or, Paizo maps or whatever it is, versus, Roll 20, which is like, there was a learning curve, but once you learn it, it's pretty easy.
Now, we talked about keeping the game active and personal for the players and trying to hit these character moments and the arcs. But how do you keep a game like this personal for you? You're the dungeon master. You're playing it in a sense, but you're also outside of it. You're working with the players. You're kind of working against the players. How do you keep it interesting for you as a dungeon master? How do you stay engaged when you're not the player? Or do you have challenges even doing that? Is this something that you just slip into that role and you relish being the god of the universe in that?
Well, I've always said that the monsters are the dungeon master's characters. So with that said, sometimes I get attached to them. Sometimes I don't want to see that white dragon get killed, and there's a part of me that's mad or upset when somebody hits that roll because I wanted a better showing from the dragon. I wanted, I was really rooting, and I was a kid that rooted for the monsters in movies anyway. So, but I would say that other, great tool for dungeon masters is get to know your monsters. Especially the complex ones as your players are going up in level. The greatest. One of the best compliments for me is my players after an adventure. For example, like if you remember, like the Green Dragon adventure, with the Green Dragon High Lord inside of that, the cave and and back in the waterfall.
Yep.
Afterwards, people saying, some of the players saying, "Man, you played that Green Dragon to perfection," and I enjoyed that because what I was doing was it was like a situation where there was like an obstruction in the middle of a pool of water, and the Green Dragon's aquatic, so we could hide underneath the water and pop up and use its movement to come around. And it was like, I was hiding until the breath weapon recharged, so that nobody could get a shot at it, and then come up and boom, and then slide back. And you guys were scared, which then of course is a fun emotion. I think D&D without fear is like, I don't know, it's like a roller coaster without a hill. To me, I love when the players are scared, and when we say, okay, that's it for tonight, we'll join back next week, and it's like, no, and then all week there's this terror of we're going to lose our characters, but you guys find a way, and that's what's so fun, is that I try to find, have a good sense of what's an appropriate level of difficulty, but then so when you guys win, or do you get, there's a real rush and a feeling of satisfaction, people clapping, yeah, all right, and I think, like I said, that comes from a DM getting in.
You imbue the antagonists, or the opposition, with intelligence that's reflective of who they are, what their species is, what type of creature they are, what their tactics would be. And I find that sometimes in especially when you get higher level, that maybe the dungeon master isn't as versed in what the archlich can do, or what a dragon can really do, and how to play those legendary actions. So I think it is like, it always comes back to what you said at the beginning, which is prep. not just like a solid session 0, so everyone gets to understand each other's characters, but prep. So when you get there, you have the tools to freely play because you know it inside and out, and you know the different directions that a group can go, and you also know just how they may react, and especially if it's their home or their lair, just how they're going to protect it and play it. And I think by taking it so seriously, that adds to the drama, so that we feel that terror and we have that fear, because we have also then through role play and comedy and camaraderie have come to love our characters, and you don't want that character to die. But then when your adversary is that much stronger and that much more committed and true to what they are, that brings the drama. I think that's essential. So I'd say it's the prep. I always feel with the way you dungeon master, it's thorough and it's honest, and you play, not ruthless, but you play to the animal or the creature to its fullest.
Thanks. Yeah. I'm glad that, yes, not ruthless, but but like I said, it's you want your players to feel like they had the full experience. You don't want them to walk away and say, "Well, we fought that dragon, but I don't think you did that right." And it's not to say like don't be afraid, because there is a learning curve with D&D. And the best way to start dungeon mastering, if you've never done it before, is go get the starter kit and stay a chapter ahead of the class. You learn that first chapter, with that goblin battle by the side of the road, and you just stay ahead of the class, and you'll learn as your players go up in level. You'll go up in level. I think as a dungeon master, I mean, I'm just trying to get this all in here under the wire, but another great way is like ask your players what spells they're picking, and then go read those spells, and then go read the Reddit threads and go understand how that spell works. But I think as a DM, the more you understand, the smoother it goes. And it's a lifelong skill. I know people that have been DMing the same game for 20 years, and they're still surprised by things that happen in the game. And I think that's what's so compelling about it, is that no matter how many times you played or how long you've played it, something's going to happen that's going to make you shake your head and start laughing, because it's so crazy.
Yeah, I think I was always a player, but it's good to just jump in without fear. Just try DMing. I think it makes you learn a lot about the game and yourself.
Yeah. So,
Thank you.
I hope everybody out there got something out of this. Yeah, thanks so much, Kyle. It's great to see you virtually.
Looking forward to playing again soon.
Yeah, man. And thank you to D&D for having us. This was really fun.
Have a great Pulse Con, everyone. Take care.